To continue our courses on helping people understand the journey if federal authorities have brought a criminal charge against you, you really want to understand the federal sentencing guidelines. Now, the guidelines are a result of the 1984 Comprehensive Crime Control Act. Prior to that legislation, we had a system of sentencing in the United States that was called indeterminate sentencing, meaning a judge would impose a sentence, then the individual would go into the prison system, and there would be a separate body, typically under the U.S. Parole Commission, that would that assess your adjustment in prison and assess whether you should remain in prison or go home and serve the remainder of your time on parole. But that 1984 Comprehensive Crime Control Act, also known as Truth in Sentencing Laws, and what introduced the federal sentencing guidelines, really changed things. It removed a lot of discretion from federal judges and put a lot more discretion into the eyes of prosecutors that could assess how they were going to bring a charge against an individual, which could influence the length of time that a person would serve in prison. So you really want to understand the sentencing guidelines. They are much better today than they were when they initially began, and they initially began for all offenses that occurred after November the 1st, 1987. I was a pre-guideline case, which is why I had a 45-year sentence, but I only served 26 years in federal prison because I received more statutory good time than exists for people who are sentenced today. On the flip side, when they first started bringing in the guidelines, they were mandatory, meaning judges had to sentence people within the guideline range unless there was some extraordinary or compelling reason. But I think it was 2015, there was a Supreme Court case known as Booker, which made the guidelines discretionary. So they became then actually a true guideline where judges would assess the guidelines and what Congress or the U.S. Sentencing Commission recommended, and then figure out, is that an appropriate sentence, or should they go one way or another. It might make more sense for you to understand this if I share my screen from our website, and you could kind of get an idea of the sentencing table itself. So here is the federal sentencing guidelines table, and you will see that it has different. Let me see if I could make it a little bit bigger and still scroll over there so that you could see it a little more clearly. Well, it's a little more difficult. So let me just make it about right there. Okay, that's a good size screen. Okay, so what you see here at the top of the screen is you have a criminal history category, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But here you have the offense levels. Okay, offense levels 1 through, I think it's like 43. Yeah. Okay, so what the U.S. Sentencing Commission has done is it has identified what level of points should each offense carry. But that level of points is only the start of the guidelines. In addition to the base offense level, like let's consider the base offense level for fraud. The base offense level for fraud is 6 points unless it's over a certain amount or some other criteria, in which case the base offense level is 7 points. Okay, so it's 6 or 7. However, there is a series of upgrades, so to speak, or sentencing enhancements based on the amount of loss. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean how much money was taken. It's what the judge finds was the intended amount of loss. There may have been no loss. You may have paid everything back. None of that is relevant. What is relevant is, I shouldn't say in a mitigation strategy it may be relevant, but for purposes of sentencing guidelines, it's the amount of intended loss. So if there was an intended loss of $3 million or $5 million or $100,000, right, there's going to be a series of enhancements that's going to start at 7. Then there might be a 10-point enhancement, which takes you to level 17, or a 20-point enhancement, which takes you to level 27. So you really want to understand the base offense level, which is assigned by the guidelines, but then you want to understand what are the additional enhancements that or adjustments that may be included in those guidelines. For example, as I just described, typically with financial crimes, there's an amount of money. With drugs, it might be an amount of drugs. But there are other types of things, such as obstruction of justice. Meaning, if you try to influence what somebody else does, for example, prosecutors may bring an enhancement for obstruction of justice, or they could bring an entirely new criminal charge. So you want to understand these things. Another type of enhancement that might work in your favor is acceptance of responsibility, which could lower the amount of sentencing base offense level, lower the base offense level. So these adjustments make a huge difference in this sentencing guidelines table that I'm showing you right here, right? If you have a sentencing guideline of 24, but not say cooperated, but you just accepted responsibility and pleaded guilty with a plea agreement, the prosecutors are probably going to allow a 3-level downward departure. So 1, 2, 3, that'll take you down to a level 21. And you can see the range there is 37 to 46 months versus, say, 51 to 63 months. So it's a big difference. And again, these are starting points. These are only guidelines. Every individual has to work toward a mitigation strategy, which I've shown you. What I really think you should be doing is using our website where everything is free, going to the profiles page. Okay, you can get there right here. Just click that button at the top right behind my picture there. You click that button and you go to the profiles page and you start memorializing and documenting your story, showing why are you a worthy candidate for relief. The harder you work, the more points you are going to earn, and you could use all of those strategies later when you're trying to pursue administrative relief once your judge imposes a sentence. Whatever sentence your judge imposes, that is just a start. You have to continue the advocacy efforts that will help you position yourself for administrative relief, for clemency, for a transition to home confinement, for a lower sentence, right? No one should work harder than you. And you could learn everything that you need to do just by spending time going through the free resources we make available at prisonprofessors.org. Everything is free. I always make 3 promises. Never going to lie to you, never going to ask you to do anything I didn't do, and never going to charge anybody a penny for this information. I believe that every individual needs this information, and I know that there are a lot of shady groups out there that fancy themselves prison consultants that don't really have experience, and they're going to try and fleece you out of $5 grand, 10 grand, 50 grand, whatever it is they can get, despite not having a very solid record of working toward meaningful outcomes. I was in prison for 26 years. A lot of leaders helped me, and that's why I'm committed to this kind of personal ministry of running a nonprofit to give you as much information as I possibly can. I'm not available for personal cases, but if somebody needs that, I only recommended one group, and that's our sponsor. And you can visit their free interactive webinars at whitecollaradvice.com/nonprofit. Okay, again, everything we do is free. So, but you have to be the CEO of your life. You have to work to learn about these different mechanisms, because your lawyer may or may not explain what the nuances are here of these guidelines, such as offense levels, but also criminal history categories, right? If you have very little or no criminal record, you're going to be in category 1, and you could see this range. That's what this range is, right? 24 to 30 months. It's very different from the range that somebody would face if they have a prior criminal history. It could be 27 to 33 months for a category 2, 30 to 37 months, category 3, category 4, right? And the more you go, the higher you are on the base offense level, the bigger the range. Look at a level 28. That's 78 to 97 months. But if you've got prior history, you might be looking at 140 to 175 months. So, and this is all a starting point. Again, it's your job to work toward a mitigation strategy. And that mitigation strategy should be comprehensive. This is your responsibility to start building advocacy tools that you could use much later in the journey. But make sure at the earliest possible time before sentencing, get a good understanding of the sentencing table. Understand the vertical axis, which I've shown you right here, which is the base offense level section, and the horizontal access, which has to do with criminal history and so on and so forth. You want to understand departures and variances, and you might want to speak with your defense attorney to help you understand that. A downward departure, for example, for substantial assistance, can be extraordinary. It could result in you not going to prison at all. I knew one guy that started off with prosecutors asking for 10 years, but because of his cooperation agreement, he ended up serving his entire sentence with community service. Never went to prison. So make sure that you understand those options and decide whether it's right for you. Upward departures are also a possibility, and that's something that prosecutors may argue for if they found that you have been obstructive to the process. So the more you learn and the more you educate yourself on these processes, the better prepared you are going to be, the more effective you are going to be at working with your defense attorney and really architecting a strategy, because you're the CEO of your life, architecting a strategy that is going to work for you. Make sure that you get a good understanding of what enhancements prosecutors or probation officers might impose on the sentence. With probation officers, it's very objective. They're looking at whatever evidence the prosecutor has fed to them, and they're saying, hey, we think you should have 4 points for this, 3 points for sophisticated activity, all kinds of things. So you want to educate yourself on this long before you make a decision on how to respond to a criminal charge. The key takeaways is that judges will begin with the federal sentencing guidelines, but that doesn't necessarily mean where they're going to end. You have to invest your own time and energy to develop the best strategy that will work for you. A criminal charge has lifelong implications. It has collateral consequences. And the more you educate yourself, the better prepared you are going to be to work with defense attorney, the better prepared you are going to be to make an informed decision. That's why we offer everything for free at Prison Professors, because I really want you to get more fluent and more literate about how the system operates. I didn't understand anything about the system, made a series of really bad decisions at the earliest stage that led to my serving a much longer sentence, but it also influenced me to want to be the change that I want to see in the world, which is why I built our nonprofit with hopes of helping people at scale. And we really love you to be a member of our community. So visit us at prisonprofessors.org. Make sure that you put your email in there so that you can get the newsletters and learn about the advocacy work that we are doing. If you do need a personal guide, I'm sorry, I'm not the guy, but you could definitely visit whitecollaradvice.com/nonprofit. Just be very aware and wary of people who served a year in jail and fancy themselves an expert. You are the expert of your life, and nobody should work harder than you on working towards the best possible outcome. I'm Michael Santos. I believe in you. Be cool.